I was at my son's house when a neighbor rushed up to me. She grabbed my arm and whispered, "Ma'am, you have no idea who really lives here." Then she turned and disappeared. When I stepped inside, I screamed in horror. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. I had always prided myself on being observant. 63 years of living teaches you to notice the small things. The way someone averts their eyes when they're lying. The tremor in a voice that betrays fear. The subtle shift in atmosphere when you've walked into a room where you weren't expected. But nothing, not all those years of raising 3 children and managing a household, could have prepared me for what Mrs. Kovich whispered to me that Tuesday afternoon in October. I had driven up to Portland from my small farmhouse in Willamette Valley to visit my son, Leo. The trip took just under 2 hours, winding through Oregon's countryside before hitting the sprawl of the city. Leo had bought the house on Sycamore Lane 3 years ago, right after his promotion at the tech firm. It was a beautiful craftsman-style home in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place where young families pushed strollers and people actually knew their neighbors' names. Or so I thought. I'd parked on the street. Leo's driveway was blocked by his wife Stephanie's SUV, and was gathering the apple pies I'd baked that morning when I noticed the elderly woman standing at the edge of her lawn next door. She was thin, maybe 75, with silver hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her hands clutched a garden trowel, but she wasn't looking at her roses. She was staring at Leo's house with an expression I couldn't quite read. Fear? Suspicion? Both? When our eyes met, something shifted in her face. She set down the trowel and moved toward me with surprising speed for someone her age. "Excuse me," she said, her accent thick. Eastern European, I guessed. "You are visiting the Hendersons?" "I'm Leo's mother, Rosa Henderson." I smiled, balancing the pie carriers. "Are you a neighbor?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked over her shoulder at Leo's house, then back at me. Her hand reached out and gripped my forearm with unexpected strength. "Ma'am," she said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper, "you don't know who really lives in this house." The words hit me like cold water. "I'm sorry. What do you mean?" But she was already backing away, her eyes wide with something that looked like genuine terror. "I shouldn't have said anything. Forget it. Please. Wait, Mrs. Kovich. But please, forget I spoke to you." She turned and hurried back to her house, nearly tripping on her front steps in her haste to get inside. The door slammed behind her, and I heard the distinct sound of a deadbolt sliding into place. I stood there on the sidewalk, 2 apple pies cooling in my hands, trying to make sense of what had just happened. A car passed slowly down the street, and I noticed the driver, a man in his 40s with a baseball cap, watching me in his rearview mirror before turning the corner. The front door of Leo's house opened, and my son appeared, all smiles and expensive dental work. "Mom, I thought I heard you pull up. Here, let me take those." He jogged down the steps and relieved me of the pies, planting a kiss on my cheek. "You didn't have to bring anything. You know Steph's been trying out that new meal service." "I know, sweetheart, but I had the apples from the orchard and thought—" I glanced back at Mrs. Kovich's house. The curtains in the front window twitched. "Leo, how well do you know your neighbors?" "The neighbors?" He followed my gaze. "Oh, you mean the Kovichs? Not well. They keep to themselves." "Why?" I wanted to tell him about the strange encounter, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the casual way he dismissed the question, or the fact that Stephanie appeared in the doorway behind him, her smile tight and her designer yoga outfit somehow making me feel frumpy in my cardigan and slacks. "Rosa, what a surprise!" Stephanie's voice had that particular pitch that made the word surprise sound like inconvenience. "Leo didn't mention you were coming today." "I called him last week," I said, forcing warmth into my tone. "Didn't he tell you?" "He must have forgotten to mention it." Stephanie's smile never reached her eyes. "Well, come in, though I should warn you, we're having the floors refinished upstairs, so it's a bit of a mess. The house smelled of wood varnish and something else I couldn't quite place. Something medicinal, almost antiseptic. As I stepped inside, I noticed things I hadn't seen on previous visits. A new deadbolt on the basement door. A security camera mounted in the corner of the living room, its red light blinking steadily. Through the kitchen doorway, I could see boxes stacked against the wall, marked with labels I couldn't read from this distance. "Leo, are you planning to move?" I asked, setting my purse on the console table. "What? No, of course not." He laughed, but it sounded forced. "Those are just some things we're storing for Steph's brother. He's between apartments." "I didn't know Tyler was moving." Stephanie cut in smoothly. "It's all very recent. Last minute, really. Can I get you some tea, Rosa? We have that organic chamomile you liked last time." I nodded, though I'd never expressed any preference for chamomile. As Stephanie disappeared into the kitchen, I took the opportunity to really look at Leo, my firstborn, my dependable son who'd always been an open book. But now, standing in his beautiful house with its new security system and mysterious boxes, he looked like a stranger. There were dark circles under his eyes. His hands kept moving to his pockets and then back out again, a nervous habit I'd last seen when he was 12 and had broken the neighbor's window with a baseball. "Is everything okay, honey?" I asked quietly. "Of course. Why wouldn't it be? You look tired. Big project at work. I'm up for senior director, remember? Lots of late nights." He glanced toward the kitchen, then lowered his voice. "Look, Mom, I know Steph can be intense, but she's under a lot of stress right now. Her mother's been sick, and Tyler's situation, and—" "I understand," I said, though I wasn't sure I did. Something was wrong here. I could feel it the way you can feel a storm coming before the clouds arrive. Stephanie returned with tea in delicate china cups, and we made awkward small talk about the weather, the farm, my other children. But my mind kept returning to Mrs. Kovich's words. "You don't know who really lives in this house." After about 30 minutes, I excused myself to use the bathroom. "Upstairs or down?" I asked. "Down," Stephanie said quickly. "The upstairs bathroom is part of the renovation mess." But as I walked down the hallway, I noticed the basement door, the one with the new deadbolt, was slightly ajar. The medicinal smell was stronger here, and I could hear something, a faint, rhythmic sound, almost like breathing, but mechanical. "Mom?" Leo appeared behind me, his hand moving to close the basement door. "Bathroom's this way." I thought I heard something. "Old house, lots of creaks and groans. The furnace has been acting up." I let him guide me to the bathroom, but my pulse was racing. In the mirror above the sink, my reflection looked pale, worried. I ran cold water over my hands and tried to organize my thoughts. When I emerged, I found Stephanie alone in the living room, typing rapidly on her phone. She looked up with that same tight smile. "Leo had to take a work call. You know how it is." "Of course." I picked up my purse. I should probably head back anyway. "It's a long drive, and I want to get home before dark." "So soon?" "You just got here." But she didn't sound disappointed. She sounded relieved. As I walked to my car, I felt eyes on me. Mrs. Kovich was back in her garden, pretending to tend her roses but watching me with that same fearful expression. I lifted my hand in a small wave, but she quickly looked away. I was halfway down the block when I checked my rearview mirror. Leo and Stephanie stood in their doorway, watching me drive away. And in the window of the basement, just for a moment, I could swear I saw a face. Pale, drawn, frightened. But when I blinked, it was gone. The drive home seemed longer than usual. My mind churned through everything I'd seen and heard. The security camera, the locked basement door, the boxes labeled in what I now realized might be a foreign language, Mrs. Kovich's terror, the mysterious face in the window. You don't know who really lives in this house. Back at my farmhouse, as darkness fell over the valley, I stood at my kitchen window and thought about my son, about the boy who'd always told me everything, who'd never been able to keep a secret, who'd confessed to every teenage transgression before I'd even asked. That boy was gone. In his place was a man with shadows under his eyes and locks on his basement door. I picked up my phone to call him, then set it down again. Instead, I opened my laptop, the one my daughter had insisted I buy last year, and typed Sycamore Lane, Portland, Oregon, into the search bar. The first result made my blood run cold. It was a news article from 8 months ago. Police investigate missing person case in Northeast Portland. The address given was 3 houses down from Leo's home. I clicked the link, and a woman's face filled my screen. She was young, maybe 30, with dark hair and frightened eyes. The caption read, Maria Santos, last seen in the Sycamore Lane neighborhood. Family fears foul play. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Leo. Thanks for visiting, Mom. Sorry it was short. Let's plan something longer soon. Love you. I stared at the message, then back at Maria Santos's face on my screen. Something was very, very wrong on Sycamore Lane. And whether my son knew it or not, I was going to find out what. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, falling down a rabbit hole of news articles, police reports, and neighborhood forums. Maria Santos had vanished on a Tuesday evening in February after telling her roommate she was going to meet someone about a job opportunity. She'd left her apartment, just 4 blocks from Leo's house, and never returned. The police had searched the neighborhood. They'd interviewed residents. The case had made local news for about 2 weeks before fading into the background noise of Portland's crime statistics. Missing persons, especially young women, especially immigrants, they disappeared from headlines as quickly as they disappeared from their lives. But what chilled me most was a comment I found on a neighborhood Facebook group, posted 3 months after Maria vanished. Anyone else notice the weird activity on Sycamore Lane? Cars coming and going at odd hours. Sounds from the Henderson house at night. Someone should look into it. The Henderson house. My son's house. The comment had been deleted, but someone had screenshotted it and reposted it on Reddit. I saved the image to my desktop, my hands trembling slightly. At 6 in the morning, I called my daughter, Julie. She lived in Seattle, worked as a corporate attorney, and had inherited my skeptical nature. Mom, it's 6 a.m. Is everything okay? I need you to do something for me, I said, quietly, without telling Leo. There was a pause. What's going on? I told her everything. Mrs. Kovich's warning, the locked basement, the security cameras, the missing woman. Julie listened without interrupting, which I'd learned meant she was taking notes. That's concerning, she said finally. But Mom, there could be perfectly innocent explanations. Maybe they're storing valuables in the basement. Maybe Stephanie's paranoid about break-ins. As for the missing woman, that's 3 houses away. 4 houses. And Julie, I saw something in the basement window. A face. You saw something. In the moment. After a strange conversation. Memory is unreliable under stress. You know that. I could hear the lawyer in her, building a defense against my concerns. I know what I saw. Okay. She sighed. Look, I'll make some calls. I have a friend at the Portland PD. But Mom, you need to be careful. If you start throwing around accusations and there's nothing there, it could damage your relationship with Leo permanently. Stephanie already looks for reasons to keep you at arm's length. She was right about that. After Leo married Stephanie 5 years ago, the invitations had become less frequent, the phone calls shorter. I'd chalked it up to newlywed independence, but now I wondered if there had been more to it. Just see what you can find out, I said. Please. I will. But promise me you won't go back there alone. Not until we know more. I promised. Though even as I said it, I knew it was a lie. After we hung up, I showered and dressed, then drove into town to the small public library. I'd learned long ago that librarians were often better investigators than journalists. I found Mrs. Mullen, who'd helped me research property records when I was fighting a boundary dispute with my neighbor 10 years ago. Rosa, haven't seen you in months. What brings you in? I need to look up some public records. Property ownership, sales history, for an address in Portland. She led me to a computer terminal and showed me how to access the county database. Within minutes, I had the full history of Leo's house. It had been built in 1924, changed hands several times over the decades. But what caught my attention was the most recent sale before Leo bought it. The house had been owned by a shell company called Cascade Holdings LLC for exactly 18 months. They'd purchased it from an estate sale, done minimal work, then sold it to Leo for well below market value. That's unusual, Mrs. Mullen said, reading over my shoulder. This neighborhood, houses go for premium prices. Why would they sell at a loss? That's what I'd like to know. I wrote down the information about Cascade Holdings, then searched for the company. It had been dissolved 6 months after the sale to Leo. No officers listed, no business history, nothing. A ghost company. My phone rang. It was Leo. Mom, hey, listen. Stephanie mentioned you seemed uncomfortable yesterday. Did something happen? I could hear the careful concern in his voice, but also something else. Wariness? Fear? No, sweetheart. I was just tired from the drive. Because she said you were asking about the neighbors and looking at the basement door, and I don't know. She got the impression you were suspicious of something. There it was. Stephanie had noticed my attention, and now she was working to control the narrative. I'm sorry if I made her uncomfortable, I said, keeping my voice light. You know me, always curious about old houses. Occupational hazard of living in a farmhouse built in 1890. He laughed, relieved. That's what I told her. Anyway, I wanted to invite you back for dinner next weekend. Stephanie's idea, actually. She wants to make up for yesterday being so rushed. That's sweet of her. My mind raced. Why would Stephanie want me back? To prove everything was normal? To watch me more carefully? Great! How about Saturday? 6 o'clock? I'll be there. After we hung up, I sat in my car in the library parking lot, thinking. I had 6 days before Saturday. 6 days to figure out what was happening in my son's house before I walked back into whatever trap Stephanie might be setting. I called Julie back. I need that information as soon as possible. I'm working on it. But Mom, David called me. My youngest son. The one who'd moved to California and rarely called unless he needed money. What did David want? He asked if you'd been acting strangely. Said Stephanie had reached out to him, concerned about your behavior. She told him you seemed confused yesterday, maybe showing early signs of dementia. Rage flooded through me, hot and sharp. She said, what? I know. It's manipulative as hell. But Mom, this is exactly why you need to be careful. If she's already planting seeds that you're losing your faculties, anything you accuse her of will be dismissed as paranoid delusions. I am not losing my mind. I know that. But she's smart. She's building a defense before you've even made an accusation. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. What did David say? He believes her. I'm sorry, but you know how David is. He always takes the path of least resistance. Of course he did. David, who'd borrowed money for a failed restaurant, who'd never paid back a cent, who blamed everyone but himself for his problems. David, who would side with whoever fed his narrative that the world was against him. What about Leo? I don't think she's talked to him yet. Or if she has, he's not taking it seriously. But Mom, you need to understand. If this goes sideways, you could lose both your sons. The thought made me physically ill. But I also knew I couldn't walk away. Not if Leo was in danger. Not if there was even a chance that whatever was happening in that house could hurt him. That afternoon, I drove back to Portland. Not to Sycamore Lane, but to the neighborhood where Maria Santos had lived. Her apartment building was a modest complex near the university, the kind of place where students and recent graduates squeezed into small units with dreams of better futures. I rang the building manager's bell and waited. A tired-looking woman in her 50s answered. Help you? I'm doing some research, I said, which was technically true. About Maria Santos, the woman who went missing. Her expression shuddered. Police already talked to everyone. I know. I'm not police, I'm trying to understand what happened to her. Why? You family? No. But I hesitated, then decided on honesty. I think something happened to her near where my son lives, and I'm worried about him. She studied me for a long moment, then opened the door wider. Come in. Her apartment smelled like coffee and cigarettes. She gestured for me to sit on a worn couch covered in cat hair. Name's Rita. I was here the night Maria disappeared. Talked to her right before she left. What did she say? Said she had a job interview. Private care position, she called it. Taking care of an elderly person or something. Said the money was really good. Cash under the table. Rita lit a cigarette despite the no-smoking sign on her own wall. I told her it sounded sketchy. But Maria, she was desperate. Student loans, credit card debt, sending money back to her family in Guatemala. She needed work. Did she say where the interview was? Somewhere in Northeast Portland. Nice neighborhood, she said. She seemed excited about it. Northeast Portland. Sycamore Lane was in Northeast Portland. Did she mention an address? A name? No, but she showed me the text message she got. From a blocked number, said to come alone, don't tell anyone. They'd explain everything in person. Rita's hands shook as she tapped ash into a coffee cup. I should have stopped her. Should have made her report it or something, but she was 28 years old, you know. You can't tell adults what to do. Did you tell this to the police? Of course. They said they'd investigate, but she shrugged. What can they do? No witnesses, no evidence, no body? Maria's just another missing person statistic. I thanked her and left my phone number, asking her to call if she remembered anything else. As I walked back to my car, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Stop asking questions, for Leo's sake. My blood ran cold. I looked around the parking lot, suddenly aware of how exposed I was. A dark sedan idled at the corner, its windows tinted too dark to see inside. As I watched, it pulled away slowly, deliberately. Someone was watching me, and they knew exactly what I was doing. I got in my car and locked the doors, my heart hammering. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my ex-husband, Robert. Rosa, is everything all right? I got in my car and locked the doors, my heart hammering. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my ex-husband, Robert. Rosa, is everything all right? I need your help, I said. It's about Leo. Robert arrived at my farmhouse 3 hours later. We'd been divorced for 15 years, separated for 5 before that. But we'd managed to maintain a cordial relationship, mostly because he'd moved to Eugene and we only saw each other at major family events. He'd remarried, a pleasant woman named Carol who taught kindergarten, and seemed content with his life of retirement and golf. But when he walked through my door that evening, I saw the father he'd once been. Protective, alert, ready to fight for his children. Tell me everything, he said. I did. Every detail, from Mrs. Kovach's warning to the threatening text message. He listened without interrupting, his jaw tightening as I spoke. You should go to the police, he said when I finished. And tell them what? That my son's house makes me uncomfortable? That a neighbor whispered something cryptic? They'll think I'm paranoid. Or worse, they'll believe Stephanie's dementia story. Then what do you want me to do? Come with me Saturday. To dinner. Be my witness. He rubbed his face, a gesture I remembered from 1,000 arguments during our marriage. Carol's not going to like this. Robert, our son might be in danger. Or he might be fine. And we're about to blow up his marriage and his relationship with you based on a hunch. He held up his hand before I could protest. But you're right. We need to know. I'll come. After he left, I tried to sleep but couldn't. I kept thinking about Maria Santos, about that text message luring her to a job interview, about the face I'd seen in Leo's basement window. Around 2 in the morning, my phone lit up with a call from Julie. Mom, are you awake? Unfortunately, I found something. My friend at Portland PD ran the address. There have been 3 welfare checks called in on that house in the past year. My pulse quickened. What kind of welfare checks? Neighbors reporting strange sounds at night. Possible domestic disturbance. But each time the police went out, Leo and Stephanie answered the door. Everything looked fine. No signs of trouble. The officers noted that the couple seemed nervous, but cooperative. Nervous about what? That's not in the report. But Mom, there's more. I had another friend run Stephanie's background. Her maiden name is Stephanie Volkov. Born in Russia. Immigrated at age 12 with her mother. I knew she was Russian. So what? So her mother, Irina Volkov, died 2 years ago. Officially from complications of early-onset dementia. But here's the thing. Irina was only 63. And according to her death certificate, she'd been living at Leo and Stephanie's address for the last 6 months of her life. I felt something click into place. The basement. Maybe. I don't know. But Mom, I did some more digging. Stephanie has a brother. Tyler. Leo mentioned he was storing things for Tyler. Tyler Volkov. And Mom, he has a record. Fraud, identity theft, served 18 months 5 years ago. He was part of a scheme targeting elderly immigrants, convincing them to sign over power of attorney, then draining their accounts. My hands went cold. Oh, God. It gets worse. I found Tyler's last known address. It's the same address as Cascade Holdings. the shell company that owned Leo's house. The room seemed to tilt. Everything was connected. The house, Stephanie's family, the missing woman, the locked basement. Julie, what if Leo doesn't know? What? What if he has no idea what Stephanie's involved in? What if she's using him, using his house? Then we need to be very, very careful. Because if Leo is innocent and we accuse his wife of whatever this is, we could destroy him. We talked for another hour, building theories, discarding them, building new ones. By the time we hung up, I had a plan. It was risky, possibly illegal, and could backfire spectacularly, but I couldn't wait until Saturday. I couldn't sit in my farmhouse knowing what I knew and do nothing. The next morning, I called Mrs. Kovich. It took 4 tries before she answered, and when she did, her voice was barely a whisper. "Who is this?" "Mrs. Kovich, this is Rosa Henderson, Leo's mother. We spoke the other day. I can't talk to you. Please don't call again." "Wait, please. I need to understand what you meant." "About not knowing who lives in that house." Silence. Then, "Are you alone?" "Yes." "Come to my house. 1 hour. Park on the next street over, walk through the back alley, and make sure no one follows you." She hung up. I drove to Portland in a daze, my mind churning. I parked 3 blocks away and walked to Mrs. Kovich's house exactly as she'd instructed, checking over my shoulder constantly for the dark sedan or any sign I was being followed. She opened her back door before I could knock, pulled me inside, and locked it behind me. Her kitchen was immaculate, smelling of coffee and something baking, but her hands shook as she gestured for me to sit. "You understand you're putting us both in danger?" she said. "I understand something is very wrong, and I think my son might not know. I think his wife is evil." Mrs. Kovich's voice was flat, certain. "I know because I saw what they did to the woman who lived there before." "Maria Santos?" She looked startled. "You know about Maria?" "I know she went missing. I know she lived near here." "She came to that house," Mrs. Kovich said. "I saw her arrive. It was evening, February 14th, Valentine's Day. I remember because I was bringing in flowers my husband had bought me. He passed last year, but I keep the tradition." Her eyes filled with tears. "I saw the girl go inside. Young, pretty, nervous. She knocked on the door and the wife answered. They talked for a moment, then the girl went inside. Did you see her leave?" "No." "And 3 days later, the police came asking if anyone had seen her. I told them yes, I saw her go into the Henderson house. But when they checked with your son and his wife, they said no one had come by that night. They showed the police their security footage. It showed nothing. The girl wasn't there." "The security footage was edited," I said. "Of course it was edited. But the police believed them. Nice young couple, good neighborhood, no reason to lie." She leaned forward. "But I know what I saw, and I know what I heard that night. Shouting, a woman crying, then nothing." My stomach churned. "Why didn't you push harder? Go to the police again?" "Because 2 days after I talked to the police, someone broke into my house while I was at church. Nothing was taken. But on my kitchen table, they left a photograph." "Of what?" She stood and retrieved a small photo from a drawer, her hands trembling as she handed it to me. It showed a young woman, not Maria, lying in what looked like a hospital bed, tubes and wires connected to her arms. Her eyes were open but vacant, staring at nothing. "My daughter," Mrs. Kovich whispered. "In Prague, in a nursing home. She had a stroke 2 years ago. She needs constant care, expensive care. They threatened her. They didn't need to threaten. The message was clear. Stay quiet or something happens to my Katya." She took the photo back, clutching it to her chest. "I am a coward. I know this. But she is all I have left." I reached across and took her hand. "You're not a coward. You're a mother. I understand. But now you are asking questions. And that means they will notice. They will come for you too. Let them," I said, with more bravery than I felt. "Mrs. Kovich, do you have any proof? Anything that could help?" She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I keep a journal. Everything I see, everything I hear. Dates, times, license plates of cars that come at night. I thought, if something happened to me, maybe someone would find it. Maybe it would mean something. Can I see it?" She retrieved a small notebook from behind a canister of flour. Inside were months of observations, written in small, precise handwriting. Dates and times of unusual activity at Leo's house, license plate numbers. Descriptions of people coming and going, mostly at night, mostly through the back door. One entry stopped me cold. March 15th, 2 a.m. Black van, no windows. 3 men carry large object wrapped in tarp into house. One man looks nervous. Wife directs them to basement. They stay 1 hour. What do you think was in the tarp? I asked. Mrs. Kovich's face was grim. I try not to think about it. I photographed every page of the journal with my phone, my hands shaking. This was evidence. Real evidence. But evidence of what? Human trafficking? Murder? Some kind of fraud scheme? As I was finishing, Mrs. Kovich grabbed my arm. Wait, there's something else. The wife, she has a brother. He came by 2 weeks ago during the day. They argued in the driveway. I heard them from my garden. The brother said something about the old woman and not enough time, and we need to move faster. The wife told him to shut up, that the neighbors might hear. Did they see you? No. I ducked behind my roses. But Mrs. Henderson, I think there is someone in that basement. Someone who shouldn't be there. I thought of the face in the window, the medicinal smell, the locked door. I have to get in that house, I said. No. Are you insane? If they catch you… Saturday. I'm invited for dinner. I'll find a way to get into the basement. And if your son is part of this, if he knows what his wife is doing, then I'll deal with that too. I stood, tucking my phone into my purse. Thank you, Mrs. Kovich. You've been braver than you know. Be careful, she said. These people, they are not playing games. Whatever they are doing, it is serious. Serious enough to kill for. I left through the back door, my mind racing. I was halfway down the alley when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned to see a man in a baseball cap. The same man I'd seen driving past the day I first visited Leo. Mrs. Henderson, he said. We need to talk. I ran. I didn't think, didn't plan, just turned and sprinted toward the street where I'd parked. I heard him running after me, heard him shout something. My heart hammered so hard I thought it might burst. I wasn't 63 in that moment. I was every age I'd ever been, fighting for survival. I reached my car, fumbled with the keys, got the door open. He was 10 feet away when I started the engine, 5 feet when I threw it in reverse. His hand slapped against my window as I backed away, and I saw his face clearly for the first time. Young, scared, desperate. I drove home going 20 over the speed limit, checking my rearview mirror constantly. When I finally pulled into my driveway, I sat in the car for 10 minutes, waiting for my hands to stop shaking. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Rosa. It was Stephanie's voice, cold and controlled. I know you've been asking questions. I know you talked to the old woman next door. This needs to stop. Where's Leo? I demanded. Leo is at work. This is between you and me. A pause. Come to dinner Saturday as planned. We'll discuss this like adults. But Rosa, if you go to the police, if you tell anyone else what you think you know, you'll regret it. I promise you that. Is that a threat? It's a guarantee. Saturday, 6 o'clock. Don't be late. She hung up. I sat in my car, staring at my house, my safe, comfortable home that suddenly felt very far away from the nightmare unfolding on Sycamore Lane. My phone buzzed with a text from Julie. Found something else. Call me now. But before I could dial, another text came through. This one from Leo. Mom, can you come over tonight instead of Saturday? Something's happened. I need to talk to you. Please, come alone. I stared at the two messages. Stephanie demanding I come Saturday. Leo begging me to come tonight. My finger hovered over Julie's number, then Leo's. Every instinct screamed that this was a trap. I called Julie. Mom, thank God. Listen, I found… Julie, Leo just texted me. He wants me to come over tonight, alone. Silence. Then, don't go. What if he's in trouble? What if he's figured out what Stephanie's doing and needs help? Or what if Stephanie sent that text from his phone? Mom, this is exactly how they work. They isolate you, get you alone, and… She stopped. And what? I was going to say, and make you disappear. But that sounds melodramatic. Her voice hardened. Except we're talking about people who may have done exactly that to Maria Santos. So maybe it's not melodramatic at all. I looked out my kitchen window at the gathering darkness. I have to know if Leo is okay. Then I'm coming with you. And Dad. And we're calling the police before we go in. No. If the police show up and it's nothing, Leo will never forgive me. Stephanie will make sure of it. I took a breath. But you and your father can wait outside. If I'm not out in 30 minutes, you call 911. Mom? It's my son, Julie. I'm going. 2 hours later, I was back in Portland. Robert and Julie sat in Robert's car a block away, both of them looking grim. I'd made them promise to wait exactly 30 minutes, not a second longer. If anything feels wrong, you run, Robert said. Don't try to be a hero. I'm 63, Robert. My hero days are long behind me. But my hand shook as I reached for the door handle. The sun had set, and Sycamore Lane was dark except for porch lights and the occasional illuminated window. Mrs. Kovich's house was completely dark. I hoped she was safe. As I approached Leo's house, I noticed something odd. Stephanie's SUV was gone. Only Leo's sedan sat in the driveway. I knocked. Leo opened the door immediately, as if he'd been waiting. He looked terrible. Unshaven, his shirt wrinkled, dark circles under his eyes that were worse than I'd seen days ago. Mom, thank God you came. He pulled me inside and locked the door behind me. We don't have much time. Time for what? Leo, what's going on? He led me to the kitchen and gestured for me to sit. His hands trembled as he poured water from the tap, drank it in one gulp, then poured another. When he finally turned to face me, I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Terror. I need to show you something, he said. But first, I need you to understand. I didn't know. I swear to God, Mom, I didn't know until 3 days ago. Didn't know what? What Stephanie's been doing. What this house really is. He ran his hands through his hair. I thought I married someone I knew. Someone normal. But I married a monster. Relief and dread flooded through me in equal measure. Tell me everything. Not here. Downstairs. I need you to see. He led me to the basement door, the one with the deadbolt. He unlocked it with shaking hands, and the medicinal smell hit me immediately. Stronger now. Antiseptic, yes, but also something else. Decay. Sickness. Leo, I don't think... You need to see. You need to understand what I've been living with. We descended wooden stairs into a finished basement. At first glance, it looked normal. A couch, a television, storage boxes. But Leo led me past those, to a door at the back. Another lock. He opened it. Inside was a hospital room. Medical equipment lined the walls. Monitors, an IV stand, oxygen tanks. And in the center, on a hospital bed, lay an elderly woman. She was thin, impossibly fragile, with tubes running to her arms and an oxygen line under her nose. Her eyes were open, but vacant, staring at the ceiling. Oh my God, I whispered. Who is she? Her name is Vera Kowalski. She's 82 years old. She has advanced dementia. Leo's voice was flat, emotionless. The voice of someone who'd been pushed beyond feeling. She's also worth about $3 million. I don't understand. Stephanie and her brother Tyler, they find elderly people, immigrants mostly. People without much family, or whose families are overseas. They befriend them, gain their trust, get them to sign power of attorney documents. He gestured at the woman. Then they bring them here, keep them alive but incapacitated, and drain their accounts. My legs felt weak. How many? I don't know. But this isn't the first one. I found documents in Stephanie's safe. Documents for 5 other people over the past 3 years. All elderly, all immigrants, all dead now, according to death certificates that Stephanie somehow got falsified. Leo, we need to call the police right now. I know, but Mom, there's more. He looked at me, and I saw tears on his face. Maria Santos, the woman who went missing. She wasn't here for a job interview. She was here because Tyler needed help moving Vera from their last location. Maria was a nursing student. Stephanie found her through some online group. She offered her cash to help with a patient transfer. What happened to her? I don't know. But 3 days ago, I was digging through files on Stephanie's laptop. She thought I was at work, but I came home early. I found videos, security footage she thought she'd deleted. His voice broke. Maria saw Vera, saw that this wasn't a legitimate nursing situation. She panicked, threatened to call the police, and Tyler, he couldn't finish. But he didn't need to. We need to leave, I said. Right now. We need to get Vera out of here and go straight to the police. That's why I called you. I can't do this alone. If I call the police, Stephanie will know immediately. I think she has access to police scanners or someone feeding her information. She'll disappear before they can arrest her. But if we can get Vera out first, get her somewhere safe. Where is Stephanie now? Meeting with Tyler. She thinks I don't know what they're planning, but I overheard them last night. They're talking about moving Vera. And about you. My blood ran cold. What about me? They know you've been asking questions. They know about Mrs. Kovich's journal. Tyler searched her house 3 hours ago while she was at the grocery store. Didn't find it, which means you have it. He looked at me. Mom, they're planning to handle you the same way they handled Maria. The room spun. Leo, we need to leave now. Help me unhook her from the monitors. We can use my car. The sound of a car door slamming outside froze us both. Leo's face went white. No, she wasn't supposed to be back until midnight. Maybe it's Julie and Robert. Mom, how long have you been here? I checked my watch. 28 minutes. Julie and your father are waiting outside. They're going to call the police in 2 minutes. Good. That's good. But he didn't sound convinced. Stay here with Vera. Lock the door. Don't come out until the police arrive. Leo. Mom, please. If something happens to me, promise me you'll make sure Vera gets help. Promise me. Before I could answer, he was gone, running up the stairs. I heard the basement door close. Then voices. Stephanie's high and angry. Leo's low and defensive. I locked the door and pressed my ear against it, trying to hear. Vera made a soft sound behind me, and I turned. Her eyes had moved. She was looking at me now. And there was something in that gaze. Awareness. Fear. It's okay, I whispered, moving to her bedside. We're going to get you out of here. Upstairs, the voices grew louder. I couldn't make out words, but I heard the rage in Stephanie's tone. A crash. Something breaking. Leo shouting. Then a gunshot. The sound was impossibly loud, echoing through the house. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? Someone's been shot. 847 Sycamore Lane, Portland. My son. My voice broke. Please hurry. Ma'am, are you in the residence? I'm in the basement. There's a woman here who needs medical attention. Please, you need to send police and an ambulance. Units are on the way. Stay on the line with me. The door handle rattled. Rosa. Stephanie's voice, sickeningly sweet. I know you're in there. Open the door. I didn't answer. Behind me, Vera's monitors beeped steadily, oblivious to the nightmare unfolding. Rosa, Leo has been hurt. He needs help. Open the door and we can help him together. Where is he? I shouted. What did you do? He tried to attack me. I defended myself. But he's alive, Rosa. He's upstairs, bleeding. And he's asking for you. A pause. Open the door, or I let him die. My hand moved toward the lock, then stopped. This was a trap. It had to be. But what if Leo really was hurt? What if he was dying while I cowered in this room? The police are coming, I said. They're already on their way. I know. I heard the sirens, which means we have about 3 minutes. Something in her voice changed, became businesslike, cold. Here's what's going to happen, Rosa. You're going to open this door. You're going to help me move Vera to the van that's pulling up outside right now. And then, you're going to forget you were ever here. Or what? Or I shoot Leo in the head and tell the police you did it. That you've been having delusions, accusing me of terrible things. That you broke into our house with a gun and tried to kill us both. I defended myself, killed you. But Leo died in the crossfire. She laughed. Who do you think they'll believe? The grieving widow or the paranoid old woman with dementia? I don't have dementia. But your son David thinks you do. And your daughter Julie has been asking suspicious questions about us, which proves the instability runs in the family. Rosa, I've been building this narrative for days. Every piece is in place. The sirens were getting closer. I could hear them now, maybe a few blocks away. You're running out of time, Stephanie. So are you. And so is Leo. Tick-tock, Rosa. I looked at Vera, at her frightened eyes, then at the door separating me from my son, from the daughter-in-law who'd just revealed herself as exactly the monster Leo had called her. The sirens were louder now. Maybe 2 blocks. Maybe 1. Last chance, Rosa. I made my decision. I opened the door. But what Stephanie didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that I'd been recording our entire conversation on my phone. Every word, every threat, every admission. And that Julie hadn't waited outside for 30 minutes. She'd waited 20, then called the police. And then she'd done something incredibly stupid and incredibly brave. She'd come inside through the back door 3 minutes ago, and she was standing right behind Stephanie with a cast-iron skillet from Leo's kitchen. The look on Stephanie's face when Julie swung that skillet was something I'd remember for the rest of my life. She went down hard, the gun clattering from her hand. I kicked it away, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. "Mom, are you okay?" Julie rushed past Stephanie's groaning form. "Where's Leo?" "Upstairs. She said she shot him." We ran up the stairs together, Julie ahead of me. Leo was in the living room, pressed against the wall, his hand clutching his arm. Blood seeped between his fingers, but he was alive. "I'm okay," he gasped. "It's just my arm. She's a terrible shot." The front door burst open. Police flooded in, guns drawn, shouting commands. Robert appeared behind them, his face ashen. "Rosa! Julie! We're here!" I called. "We're okay!" The next 2 hours were a blur of police statements, paramedics, crime scene investigators. They found Tyler in his van outside, trying to start the engine with shaking hands. They found documents in Stephanie's safe, proof of 5 other elderly victims, all deceased. They found communications with a crooked lawyer, a falsified death certificates forger, and a funeral director who'd helped dispose of the bodies. And they found Vera Kowalski, still alive, still frightened, but safe now. Finally safe. Detective Morrison, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, sat across from me at Leo's kitchen table while the EMTs bandaged his arm in the living room. "Mrs. Henderson, you understand how lucky you are? I know. If you'd come here alone, if your daughter hadn't followed you in..." She shook her head. "This could have ended very differently. But it didn't. No, it didn't." She looked at the notes in front of her. "We'll need full statements from all of you. And we'll need that recording you made." I handed over my phone. "Everything's there. You know, most people your age would have walked away. Let someone else handle it." She was hurting my son, threatening my family. I met her eyes. "I'm 63 years old, Detective. Old enough to know when to be afraid, but also old enough to know that fear is no excuse for inaction." She smiled. "I wish more people had your courage, Mrs. Henderson. But it wasn't courage. It was something else. Something stronger and more fundamental. It was motherhood. And motherhood, I'd learned, doesn't expire with age." The Portland Police Department's interrogation room was nothing like what you see on television. It was smaller, grimmer, with flickering fluorescent lights that made everyone look sick. I sat across from Detective Morrison and her partner, Detective Mullen, a younger man with sharp eyes that missed nothing. It was 3 days after Stephanie's arrest, and they'd asked me to come in for what they called a follow-up interview. But I knew better. They were building their case, and I was a crucial witness. "Mrs. Henderson," Morrison began, sliding a folder across the table. "We've been going through everything we found in your son's house. The evidence is extensive." I opened the folder. Inside were photographs, surveillance images, bank statements, forged documents, and photographs of people, elderly people with hollow eyes and frightened expressions. "How many?" I asked quietly. "7 that we can confirm, probably more." Mullen leaned forward. "Stephanie Volkoff and her brother Tyler have been running this operation for at least 5 years. They target elderly immigrants, people without close family ties in the U.S. They befriend them, gain their trust, get them to sign over power of attorney. Then they drain their accounts and kill them," I finished. Actually, they don't kill them directly. They keep them sedated, barely conscious in hidden rooms. Then they slowly withdraw funds, pay themselves caregiver salaries, sell off property. By the time the victims die of natural causes, malnutrition, dehydration, neglect, there's nothing left. Morrison's voice was hard. It's slower than murder, more profitable, and much harder to prosecute. But you have evidence now? We do. Thanks to you, Mrs. Henderson, and thanks to Mrs. Kovich's journal. Mullen pulled out another document. Speaking of which, there's something we need to discuss. About your son. My stomach clenched. What about him? He claims he knew nothing about his wife's activities until 3 days before the incident, that he discovered files on her laptop and immediately contacted you. Morrison watched my face carefully. Do you believe him? Yes, completely. Even though the activities were happening in his house, in his basement. Stephanie controlled that space. She told him it was storage, that her mother had lived there before she died. Leo worked long hours. He was never home during the day. I met their eyes steadily. My son is not a criminal. He's a victim. Chen and Morrison exchanged a glance. Then Mullen opened another folder. We want to believe that, Mrs. Henderson, but we have evidence that complicates things. He pulled out bank statements. Transactions from the victims' accounts going into a joint account held by Leo and Stephanie. Purchases made with that money. The house renovations, the new car, vacations. He didn't know where the money came from. That's what he says. But legally, ignorance isn't a defense. He benefited from illegal activity. The district attorney is considering charges. The room tilted. You're going to arrest him? That depends, Morrison said carefully. We need the full story, Mrs. Henderson. Every detail. And we need your son to cooperate completely. Testify against Stephanie and Tyler. Help us trace the money. Identify other potential victims. He will. I promise you, he will. There's another problem. Mullen pulled out yet another document. Your daughter-in-law is claiming that Leo was the mastermind, that she was coerced into helping him, that he threatened her, abused her, forced her to participate. I laughed. I couldn't help it. The sound was bitter, harsh. That's ridiculous. Is it? Because she has evidence too. Text messages from Leo asking about the basement situation, emails about handling the money carefully. On paper, it looks bad for your son. Those messages are taken out of context. Leo was asking about storage, about their finances, normal things. Stephanie is manipulating evidence, just like she manipulated everything else. We know, Morrison said quietly. We believe you. But Mrs. Henderson, this is going to trial. And Stephanie Volkoff is smart, connected, and has hired one of the best defense attorneys in Portland. She's going to attack every witness, every piece of evidence. And she's going to attack you. How? Chen pulled out a thick file. She's going to claim you have dementia, that your testimony is unreliable, that you've been having paranoid delusions about her for years, that you never accepted her as Leo's wife, that you broke into their home and created this entire narrative to destroy her. But I have proof. The recording, which she'll claim you edited, or took out of context, or obtained illegally. Morrison's voice was gentle. Mrs. Henderson, I'm not trying to scare you. I'm preparing you for what's coming. This trial is going to be brutal. I sat back in my chair, suddenly feeling every one of my 63 years. What do you need from me? Everything. Every detail. Every observation. Every interaction. We need to build a timeline that proves Leo's innocence and Stephanie's guilt. And we need you to be prepared for her attorney to tear you apart on the stand. Over the next 4 hours, I told them everything. Every detail of my visits, my conversations with Mrs. Kovich, my research, my recordings. They took notes, asked questions, pushed for clarification. By the time we finished, I was exhausted. One more thing, Mullen said as I prepared to leave. Your other son, David. He's agreed to testify for the defense. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? Stephanie's attorney contacted him. He's going to testify that you showed signs of mental decline, that you made paranoid accusations about Stephanie, that you were obsessed with destroying your son's marriage. David doesn't know what he's talking about. Maybe not. But the jury will hear it. and combined with Stephanie's testimony, it could create reasonable doubt. Morrison stood, her expression sympathetic. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Henderson. Family cases are always the hardest." I drove home in a daze. David was going to testify against me. Against Leo. For money, probably. Or maybe just because Stephanie had convinced him her narrative was true. David, who'd always taken the easy path, who'd always believed whoever fed his victim complex. Julie called as I pulled into my driveway. "Mom, did you hear about David?" I heard. That spineless bastard. I called him, tried to talk sense into him. He said Stephanie's lawyer convinced him that Leo was guilty, that you were being manipulated by the police, that someone needed to tell the truth. The truth, according to Stephanie. Exactly. Mom, I'm flying down tomorrow. We need to prepare for trial. I've been researching elder abuse cases, victim testimony protocols. Julie, you can't be involved. You're a witness too. I know, but I can help you prepare. We're not going to let that woman destroy this family. After we hung up, I sat in my car and let myself cry. Not from fear or despair, but from rage. Rage at Stephanie for her calculated evil. Rage at David for his weakness. Rage at a system that would put my son on trial when he was clearly a victim. But rage, I'd learned, could be useful, focused, transformative. I went inside and opened my laptop. If Stephanie wanted war, she'd get war. But she'd made a critical mistake. She'd underestimated a mother's determination to protect her child. Over the next 2 weeks, I became an investigator. I contacted families of the other victims, gathering statements, building connections. I tracked down every person who'd ever worked with Stephanie or Tyler, looking for patterns, for proof of their guilt. I spent hours in libraries and county offices, pulling records, making copies, building a paper trail that couldn't be denied. And I found something. Something Stephanie had missed in her careful planning. Her mother, Irina Volkov, hadn't died of natural causes. She'd been one of the victims. The death certificate was legitimate. I verified that. But the circumstances were wrong. Irina had been only 63 when she died. Too young for the advanced dementia listed as cause of death. And more damning, I found medical records showing that Irina had been healthy just 6 months before her death. No signs of cognitive decline, no dementia diagnosis. But there were other records. Bank transfers from Irina's account to Stephanie's, sale of Irina's property in Russia, and a will, supposedly signed by Irina while suffering from dementia, leaving everything to her children. Stephanie and Tyler had killed their own mother. I took my findings to Detective Morrison, who brought in a specialist in financial crimes and elder abuse. They dug deeper, finding more evidence, building an even stronger case. "Mrs. Henderson," Morrison said during one of our meetings, "you've done what it took our entire department weeks to accomplish. If you ever want a job—" "I'm 63 and retired," I said with a smile, "but I'll keep it in mind." The trial date approached. Leo moved back home with Robert and Carol, unable to stay in the house where such horrors had occurred. He was thin, haunted, broken by the revelation of who he'd married. But he was determined to testify, to help put Stephanie away. Julie flew in 3 days before the trial. We sat in my farmhouse kitchen, the same kitchen where this nightmare had begun, and went over our testimonies. "Mom," she said finally, "you know they're going to come after you hard. Stephanie's lawyer is going to paint you as a vindictive, delusional old woman who couldn't accept her son's marriage. Let them try. I'm serious. He's good. He'll twist everything you say, make you look unreliable. Julie, I've been underestimated my entire life. By colleagues who thought I was just a housewife. By neighbors who assumed I didn't understand property law. By my own ex-husband, who thought I'd fall apart after our divorce." I met her eyes. "I'm done being underestimated, and I'm done being polite about it." The night before the trial, I couldn't sleep. I stood at my kitchen window, looking out at the dark fields of my farm, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. A whispered warning from a frightened neighbor. A mother's instinct that something was wrong. The determination to protect my son at any cost. Tomorrow, I would face Stephanie across a courtroom. Tomorrow, I would tell a jury about the monster who'd infiltrated my family. Tomorrow, I would fight not just for Leo's freedom, but for justice for 7 elderly people who died alone and afraid. My phone buzzed with a text from Leo. "Thank you, Mom, for believing me, for fighting for me. I love you." I texted back, "Always. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we end this." But I knew I wouldn't sleep. I was too focused, too ready for what was coming. Stephanie Volkov had made one critical error in her elaborate scheme. She'd threatened a mother's child, and that was a mistake she was about to pay for. The courthouse loomed gray and imposing in the morning light. News vans crowded the parking lot. The case had attracted media attention, the sensational details too juicy to ignore. "House of Horrors," read one headline. "Elder abuse ring exposed," read another. I walked through the crowd of reporters with my head high, Julie on one side and Robert on the other. Leo followed behind with Carol, his arm still bandaged from the gunshot wound. Inside, the courtroom was already packed. I saw Mrs. Kovach sitting near the front, looking small and frightened, but determined. I saw families of the victims, their faces set with grief and rage. And I saw Stephanie. She sat at the defense table in a demure gray suit, her hair pulled back, her expression one of wounded innocence. When our eyes met, she smiled. A small, confident smile that said she thought she'd already won. I smiled back. And in that smile, I put everything I'd learned over 63 years of life. Every lesson, every battle, every moment of hard-won wisdom. She must have seen something in my expression, because her smile faltered. The bailiff called us to order. "All rise." The Honorable Judge Patricia Washington presiding. The judge entered, a black woman in her 50s with an air of no-nonsense authority. She surveyed the courtroom, then nodded to the prosecutor. "The state may call its first witness." The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Karen Mullen, stood. "The state calls Rosa Henderson." I walked to the witness stand, placed my hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. And then I did exactly that. The prosecutor, Karen Mullen, led me through my testimony with precision. I described my first visit to Leo's house, Mrs. Kovach's warning, the locked basement door, the medicinal smell. I detailed my research into Maria Santos, my conversation with Rita the building manager, my discovery of the shell company that had owned the house. I was calm, methodical, factual. I'd learned long ago that emotion could be powerful, but facts were irrefutable. "Mrs. Henderson," Karen said, "can you describe what you found in the basement on the night of the incident?" "A hospital room, complete with medical equipment, monitors, and an elderly woman named Vera Kowalski being held against her will." "Objection," Stephanie's attorney, a slick man in his 40s named Richard Blackwell, rose smoothly. "Speculation. The witness has no way of knowing whether Mrs. Kowalski was there against her will." "Sustained," Judge Washington said. "Mrs. Henderson, please stick to what you observed, not your interpretations." "I observed an 82-year-old woman who was sedated, connected to medical equipment, in a locked room in my son's basement, a room my son told me he'd only discovered days before." Blackwell smirked, but I saw Judge Washington writing notes. Karen continued. "And did the defendant say anything to you that night?" "Yes. She threatened to kill my son if I didn't help her move Mrs. Kowalski. She also threatened to frame me for Leo's murder, claiming I had dementia and had broken into the house with a gun." "Objection, hearsay." "Your Honor, I have a recording of this conversation." I held up my phone. Every word is documented. The courtroom erupted. Blackwell's face went red. Judge Washington banged her gavel. "Order. Mr. Blackwell, approach the bench." There was a hushed conference at the bench. I saw Blackwell arguing vehemently, Karen responding calmly. Finally, Judge Washington nodded. "The recording is admissible. Continue, Ms. Mullen." We played the recording. Stephanie's voice filled the courtroom, cold and calculating as she threatened to kill Leo, to frame me, to make us both disappear. I watched the jury's faces change as they listened, saw doubt transform into certainty, skepticism into disgust. When it finished, Karen asked, "Mrs. Henderson, did you believe these threats?" "Absolutely. The woman who disappeared, Maria Santos, had been in that house. Mrs. Kovach saw her enter and never saw her leave. I believed if I didn't cooperate, my son and I would meet the same fate. Yet you opened the door. Yes, because I'd already called 911, because my daughter was in the house waiting to intervene, and because I wanted Stephanie's threats on record. I looked directly at the jury. I'm 63 years old. I've spent my life being underestimated, dismissed as just a housewife or just a mother. But I've learned that seeming weak can be a strength. Stephanie thought I was a confused old woman who could be intimidated. She was wrong. Blackwell's cross-examination was brutal, as expected. He questioned my memory, suggested my recording was edited, implied I'd always hated Stephanie and was trying to frame her. He brought up the dementia concerns David had raised. Mrs. Henderson, isn't it true your own son believes you're experiencing cognitive decline? My son David believes many things that aren't true. He also believes his failed restaurant was everyone's fault, but his own. Scattered laughter from the gallery. Judge Washington's lips twitched. Your Honor, Mrs. Henderson, please answer the question directly. David has never witnessed any cognitive decline in me because there hasn't been any. He's been manipulated by the defendant, just as she manipulated my son Leo. Blackwell tried for another hour, but I held firm. Every question, every insinuation, I met with calm, factual responses. I'd spent 2 weeks preparing for this. I knew every detail of my testimony, every piece of evidence, every possible attack. When I finally stepped down, I saw something in Blackwell's expression. Worry. The prosecution called witness after witness. Julie described finding me in danger, hitting Stephanie with the skillet. Leo testified about discovering the files on Stephanie's laptop, about the videos of Maria Santos's final moments that Stephanie hadn't deleted as thoroughly as she thought. Mrs. Kovac, trembling but determined, described months of suspicious activity and the photograph left on her table to threaten her daughter. Then came the financial expert, a woman named Dr. Cynthia Martinez, who'd spent 2 weeks analyzing the money trail. She showed the jury how funds flowed from victims' accounts into shell companies, then into Leo and Stephanie's joint account. However, Dr. Martinez said, there's a pattern in the spending that's significant. All major withdrawals and transfers were made by Stephanie Volkov alone. Mr. Henderson's use of the account was limited to normal household expenses, groceries, utilities, gas. He never accessed the large sums transferred from the victims' accounts. What does this suggest? That Mr. Henderson was unaware of the illegal source of the funds. His spending patterns are consistent with someone who believed they were using legitimately earned money. Blackwell tried to discredit her, but Dr. Martinez was unshakable. The prosecution's final witness was Detective Morrison, who detailed the evidence found in the house. The documents, the videos, the communications with Tyler about handling Maria Santos. Then it was the defense's turn. Blackwell called Tyler Volkov to the stand. Tyler had taken a plea deal in exchange for his testimony, and now he sat there, looking miserable, prepared to throw his sister under the bus. But Blackwell had miscalculated. Mr. Volkov, who initiated this elder abuse scheme. Stephanie did. It was all her idea. She researched the targets, set up the shell companies, arranged everything. I just did what she told me to do. And Leo Henderson? What was his role? Tyler looked at Leo, then away. He didn't have one. Leo didn't know anything. Blackwell's face went white. Mr. Volkov, you told me during our preparation that— I lied to you, Tyler said flatly. Stephanie told me to. She said if I implicated Leo, it would create reasonable doubt. But I can't do it. Leo is a good guy. He got trapped by my sister the same way those old people did. The courtroom erupted again. Judge Washington banged her gavel repeatedly. Blackwell demanded a recess. Karen Mullen sat back with a satisfied smile. When order was restored, Blackwell tried to salvage his case, but the damage was done. He called David to the stand, hoping to at least discredit me. Mr. Henderson, you have concerns about your mother's mental state? I did, David said slowly. Stephanie told me Mom was acting paranoid, making accusations. But after hearing the evidence, after hearing that recording, he looked at me, shame on his face. I was wrong. Stephanie lied to me. My mother was trying to save my brother. and I betrayed her for it. Mr. Henderson, please. I'm sorry, Mom, David said, tears streaming down his face. I'm so sorry. Blackwell gave up on David and called his final witness, Stephanie herself. She took the stand looking composed, victimized, fragile. She wove a story of being abused by Tyler, controlled by Leo, trapped in a nightmare not of her making. She cried prettily when describing how I'd attacked her, how terrified she'd been. But Karen Mullen was ready for her. Ms. Volkoff, you testified that your brother Tyler forced you to participate in this scheme. Is that correct? Yes. He threatened me, said he'd hurt me if I didn't help. I see. And your mother, Irina Volkov? Was she also a victim of Tyler's scheme? Stephanie's composure slipped. My mother died of dementia. According to her death certificate, yes. But according to medical records obtained from her physician in Portland, your mother had no signs of dementia 6 months before her death. In fact, she was in excellent cognitive health. Karen approached with a stack of documents. We also have bank records showing you drained her accounts in the months before her death. We have property records showing you sold her house and kept the proceeds. And we have testimony from her physician that when he expressed concern about her sudden decline, you fired him and found a new doctor, one who was later arrested for falsifying medical records. That's not... Ms. Volkoff, you killed your own mother, didn't you? She was your first victim. You learned from that experience, refined your methods, then expanded your operation. No, Tyler did it. Tyler was in prison 5 years ago when your mother died. He couldn't have done it. You did. Alone. Stephanie's mask cracked completely. The pretty tears became genuine ones of rage. You don't understand. My mother was going to cut me off. Said I was irresponsible. Said I'd never amount to anything. I deserved that money. I earned it taking care of her ungrateful... She stopped, realizing what she'd admitted. The courtroom was utterly silent. No further questions, Karen said quietly. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. When they returned, I sat between Julie and Leo, holding both their hands. On the charge of kidnapping, how do you find? Guilty. On the charge of elder abuse? Guilty. On the charge of murder in the 2nd degree in the death of Maria Santos? Guilty. 7 more guilty verdicts followed, 1 for each victim. Stephanie sat motionless, her face blank, as her entire carefully constructed world collapsed. Judge Washington set sentencing for 2 weeks later, denying bail. As they led Stephanie away in handcuffs, she looked at me one last time. I met her gaze steadily, letting her see in my face what she should have seen from the beginning. I was a mother, and you don't threaten a mother's child without consequences. Outside the courthouse, Leo pulled me into a tight hug. Thank you, Mom. Thank you for not giving up on me. Never, I whispered. Not ever. David approached hesitantly. Mom, We'll talk, I said. Not today, but we'll talk. He nodded, relief and shame mixing on his face. Julie wrapped an arm around me. You were incredible in there. I mean, I always knew you were tough, but I'm not tough, I said. I'm just determined. There's a difference. Mrs. Kovich appeared from the crowd, her eyes bright with tears. Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. For Vera. For all of them. For having the courage to act when I was too afraid. You were brave too, I told her. Your journal made all of this possible. Over the following months, life slowly found a new rhythm. Leo sold the house on Sycamore Lane. No one wanted to live in a place with such dark history. He found a small apartment closer to my farm, started therapy, began the long process of healing. Vera Kowalski recovered enough to give her own testimony at Stephanie's sentencing. When Judge Washington handed down 7 consecutive life sentences, Vera squeezed my hand. Her family, cousins found in Poland after extensive searching, had flown in to thank me personally. David and I rebuilt our relationship slowly, carefully. He'd learned a hard lesson about believing the easy story instead of standing by family. I forgave him, though trust would take longer to restore. Julie went back to Seattle but called every Sunday, sometimes just to talk, sometimes to tell me about new safety measures she was implementing for her own elderly clients. And me? I stayed on my farm, tending my orchards, living my quiet life. But I was changed. I'd discovered that age hadn't weakened me. It had refined me, honed me into something stronger than I'd ever been. 6 months after the trial, I received a letter from the Portland Police Department. They were forming a task force to investigate elder abuse cases and wanted me to consult. Your investigative instincts and attention to detail, Detective Morrison wrote, proved more effective than our entire department in some instances. I accepted, because I'd learned something important during those terrifying weeks. Wisdom isn't about knowing everything. It's about knowing when to act, when to wait, when to fight, and when to ask for help. It's about using every year of experience, every lesson learned, every mistake survived. The young think they have the advantage of strength and speed, but we who have lived longer, we have something better. We have perspective. We have patience. We have the knowledge that comes from decades of watching, learning, and surviving. We have wisdom. And wisdom, properly applied, is the most formidable weapon of all. I stand at my kitchen window now, looking out at the same fields I've tended for decades. The same window where I stood the night I discovered my son was in danger. Where I made the decision to fight instead of retreat. My phone buzzes with a new case file from Detective Morrison. Another suspicious situation. Another elderly person who might need help. I pour myself coffee, open my laptop, and get to work. Because someone has to stand for those who can't stand for themselves. Someone has to see what others miss. Ask the questions others ignore. Fight the battles others consider too risky. And if a 63-year-old woman with apple pies and a farmhouse can do that, well, that just proves that the most dangerous thing in the world isn't youth or strength or power. It's a mother who's decided enough is enough, and I've only just begun. Now tell me, what would you have done if you were in my place? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out the video on your screen right now. I'm sure it will surprise you.